Captain Randy Miller's eye twitched as he watched his Betazoid navigator attempt to plot a course while simultaneously trying to remove her uniform. The title of "My Alien Crew Are All in Mating Season" had seemed like a humorous exaggeration when he'd first logged it in his official report. Now, barely 2 days into their voyage, it felt like an understatement. Randy gripped the arms of his captain's chair, forcing himself to focus on the view screen ahead. The vast expanse of space stretched before the SS Andromeda, dotted with the twinkling lights of distant stars. Under normal circumstances, he'd find the view calming. Today it only served as a reminder of how far they were from any hope of assistance. The human captain had taken command of the interstellar freighter just 48 hours ago, eager to prove himself on his first deep space assignment. His crew of 20 Betazoids had seemed professional and competent during their departure from Earth's bustling spaceport. Their routine cargo run to the Betazoid homeworld should have been straightforward. A milk run, as the old-timers called it. How quickly things had changed. It started with small irregularities, crew members showing up late for shifts, minor disagreements escalating into heated arguments. Randy had chalked it up to the stress of a new mission until his first officer, Rigel, had pulled him aside with an explanation that made his blood run cold. "Captain," Rigel had said, his usually calm demeanor cracking, "I regret to inform you that our proximity to our home star system has triggered our species' annual mating season." Randy's mind reeled as he processed the implications. 20 aliens, all entering a biological frenzy at once, trapped on a ship hurtling through space, and he, the sole human, was responsible for keeping them, and their vital cargo, intact. The situation deteriorated rapidly. Missed shifts became the norm as crew members sought out potential mates. The ship's corridors echoed with passionate declarations of love and equally passionate rejections. Vital systems went unchecked as the Betazoids struggled against their overpowering urges. Worst of all was the telepathic link that formed between the Betazoids during this time. Their desires, fantasies, and frustrations broadcast uncontrollably to everyone in range, including their human captain. Randy found himself bombarded by alien thoughts and emotions, each one chipping away at his ability to focus and make rational decisions. As the Andromeda approached a treacherous asteroid field, Randy realized the full gravity of their predicament. His crew's distraction could lead to a catastrophic collision. The safety of the ship, its cargo, and every life aboard hung in the balance. Desperation drove Randy to the ship's database, searching for any solution to their crisis. His search uncovered a little-known Betazoid meditation technique, rumored to suppress mating instincts temporarily. It was a glimmer of hope, but one that came with a hefty price. To implement the technique, Randy would need to form a deep telepathic bond with each crew member. The process could permanently alter his own brain chemistry, leaving him forever changed. As he weighed the risks, alarms blared throughout the ship. They were entering the asteroid field. Time was running out. Randy had to decide, risk his own mind to save the mission, or gamble everything on his ability to navigate the dangers ahead with a crew lost to their primal urges. The fate of the SS Andromeda, and perhaps his very sense of self, rested on his next move. Randy took a deep breath, steadying himself as he faced First Officer Rigel. The Betazoid's usually composed features were twisted with nearly unleashed desire, his dark eyes unfocused. "Rigel, I need you to concentrate," Randy said, his voice low and urgent. "We're going to attempt the meditation technique." Rigel nodded, a bead of sweat rolling down his temple. I'll try, Captain." Randy placed his hands on Rigel's shoulders, closing his eyes as he initiated the telepathic bond. The sensation was unlike anything he'd experienced before, a rush of alien thoughts and emotions flooding his mind. He gasped, nearly breaking contact as the full force of Rigel's mating urges crashed over him. Images flashed through Randy's mind, the warm, red-tinged skies of Beta Z, the intricate mating rituals of its people, the overwhelming biological imperative that drove them. He gritted his teeth, pushing through the disorientation to focus on the meditation technique. Slowly, painstakingly, Randy guided Rigel's thoughts into a calmer pattern. The Betazoid's breathing steadied, his muscles relaxing under Randy's grip. As the meditation took hold, Randy felt a shift in his own mind, new neural pathways forming, accommodating the alien presence. When they finally broke contact, Randy stumbled back, catching himself on the edge of a console. His head throbbed, a dull ache pulsing behind his eyes. "Captain?" Rigel's voice was clearer now, more focused. "Are you all right?" Randy nodded, wiping away a trickle of blood from his nose. "I'm fine. How do you feel?" "Better," Rigel said, straightening his uniform. "The urges are muted, manageable." "Good," Randy said, already moving towards the next crew member. "Because we've got a lot more work to do." Over the next several hours, Randy repeated the process with key members of his crew. Each bond left him more drained than the last, the strain on his human brain mounting. By the time he finished with the chief engineer, his vision was blurring, and he could taste copper in the back of his throat. But the results were undeniable. The bonded crew members moved with renewed purpose, their actions deliberate and focused as they navigated the treacherous asteroid field. Massive chunks of rock and ice drifted past the view screen, missing the ship by mere meters as the helmsman deftly steered them through the chaos. Randy allowed himself a moment of relief before the ship lurched violently, nearly throwing him from his chair. Alarms blared as a red warning light flashed on the engineering console. "Report!" he barked, fighting down a wave of nausea. "Primary coolant system failure, Captain," the engineer responded, her fingers flying over the controls. "We're looking at a potential core breach if we can't get it stabilized." Randy's mind raced. He needed to continue bonding with the crew to fully stabilize the situation, but the imminent system failure demanded immediate attention. As he weighed his options, his gaze fell on Lyra, the ship's navigator. She met his eyes, and suddenly Randy was acutely aware of her presence. The residual telepathic connection amplified his perception of her. The graceful curve of her neck, the depth of her dark eyes, the subtle pheromones she was emitting. A rush of attraction hit him with physical force, and he realized with a start that he could sense her reciprocal interest. Randy shook his head, trying to clear it. His own hormones were shifting, aligning with the betazoid cycle. He couldn't afford the distraction, not now. "Lyra, take the helm," he ordered, forcing himself to focus. "Rigel, you're with me. We need to stabilize that coolant system." As they rushed towards engineering, Randy's communicator chirped. "Captain?" The communications officer's voice came through, tense and worried. "We're receiving a transmission from Betazoid High Command. They're accusing us of being hijacked. They're sending a military vessel to intercept us." Randy's stomach dropped. Of course. From the outside, their erratic behavior must have looked suspicious, and with him as the only human aboard. "Acknowledge the transmission," he said, his mind racing. Tell them we're experiencing technical difficulties and to stand by for a full report." They reached engineering, where the unbonded crew members were in various states of disarray. Some were attempting to work on the malfunctioning system, while others were locked in passionate embraces, oblivious to the danger. Randy steeled himself, knowing what he had to do. "Rigel, help me restrain them if necessary. We need to form the telepathic bonds now, or we'll never get this system repaired in time." As Rigel moved to assist, Randy approached the first unbonded engineer. The Betazoid's eyes were wild, unfocused. Randy reached out, initiating the bond. The rush of alien thoughts was even more intense this time, the engineer's unfiltered desires crashing over Randy's already strained mind. He pushed through, implementing the meditation technique with gritted teeth. One by one, Randy bonded with the remaining crew members. Each connection left him more disoriented, the boundaries of his own identity blurring. Blood trickled from his nose, and his vision swam with bursts of color. Finally, as he completed the last bond, Randy stumbled. Strong arms caught him, Lyra's arms. He looked up into her concerned face, feeling the heat of her skin through his uniform. "Captain," she said, her voice soft with worry, "you need to rest. You've pushed yourself too far." Randy shook his head, trying to ignore the way her touch sent shivers through him. "No time," he managed. "We need to fix the coolant system and deal with the high command. We can't afford any more distractions." But even as he spoke, Randy knew he was fighting a losing battle. His mind was awash with alien influences, his body responding to stimuli he barely understood. And through it all, Lyra's presence called to him, a siren song he struggled to resist. The fate of the ship, the crew, and possibly interstellar relations hung in the balance. And Randy, caught between his duty and his rapidly changing physiology, wasn't sure how much longer he could hold it all together. Randy forced himself to focus, pushing aside the dizzying sensations coursing through his altered mind. "We need to prioritize," he said, his voice hoarse. "The coolant system has to be our top priority. Without it, we're dead in space." Lyra nodded, her dark eyes reflecting a mix of concern and determination. "I'll assist you, Captain. My navigation skills might prove useful in rerouting power systems." As they made their way to the engine room, Randy was acutely aware of Lyra's presence beside him. The lingering, telepathic connection amplified every subtle movement, every breath. He could sense her racing thoughts, a mirror to his own tumultuous emotions. The engine room was a cacophony of blaring alarms and flashing warning lights. Randy and Lyra moved swiftly to the main control panel, their hands brushing as they reached for the same switch. A jolt of electricity seemed to pass between them, and Randy had to force himself to step back. "We need to bypass the primary coolant relay," he said, fighting to keep his voice steady. "If we can reroute power from the auxiliary systems, we might be able to stabilize the core temperature." Lyra's fingers flew over the controls, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I think I can do it, but we'll need to manually adjust the flow regulators on the lower deck." As they worked in tandem, Randy became increasingly aware of a commotion outside the engine room. Muffled shouts and the sound of fists pounding on metal reached his ears. He cast a worried glance at the sealed door. "Captain Miller?" Zoran's voice crackled over the intercom. "We have a situation. A group of unbonded males is attempting to breach the engine room. They're not in their right minds, sir. I'm holding them back, but I don't know how long I can maintain control." Randy cursed under his breath. "Acknowledged, Zoran. Do what you can to keep them contained. We need more time." As he turned back to the control panel, Randy noticed Lyra had gone pale. She was staring at a readout on one of the screens, her hand trembling slightly. "Captain," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "look at this." Randy leaned in, his eyes widening as he processed the information before him. The coolant system failure wasn't an accident or a result of the crew's distraction. Someone had deliberately sabotaged the ship's systems. Before he could fully process this new information, the ship's comm system crackled to life. "SS Andromeda, this is Captain Thal of the Betazoid Defense Force vessel Enlightenment. You are ordered to power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will be met with force. Respond immediately." Randy's mind raced. They were out of time. With a potential saboteur on board, aggressive crewmates trying to break down the door, and now a military vessel threatening to board them, their options were rapidly dwindling. In a moment of clarity, a plan began to form in Randy's mind. It was risky, possibly even suicidal, but it might be their only chance. "Lyra," he said, turning to face her, "I need you to help me set up the long-range communication array. We're going to attempt a ship-wide telepathic broadcast." Lyra's eyes widened in understanding. "But Captain, that would require completing the bonding process with the entire crew. In your current state, it could be too much for your mind to handle." Randy nodded grimly. "I know, but it's our only chance to explain our situation to the Betazoid vessel and prove we haven't been hijacked." As they worked to reconfigure the communication array, the pounding on the engine room door grew more intense. Randy could hear the metal groaning under the strain. "Captain," Lyra said suddenly, her voice urgent, "there's something you need to know about the saboteur. I think I know who—" Her words were cut off by a deafening explosion. The force of the blast threw Randy across the room, his head slamming against a bulkhead. Through the ringing in his ears, he could hear the hiss of escaping air and the wail of new alarms. As his vision cleared, Randy realized with horror that Lyra was nowhere to be seen. A gaping hole had been torn in the side of the engine room, debris floating in the zero-gravity environment beyond. "Lyra!" he shouted, his voice hoarse. There was no response. The ship's computer chimed in, its artificial voice eerily calm. Warning, life support systems critically damaged. Estimated time to failure, 47 minutes. Randy pushed himself up, ignoring the pain that lanced through his body. The situation had gone from bad to catastrophic in a matter of seconds. He needed to find Lyra, uncover the saboteur, complete the bonding process, repair the ship, and somehow convince the approaching Betazoid vessel of their innocence. As he staggered towards the hole in the hull, Randy felt a strange clarity wash over him. His unique position as a human among Betazoids, initially a source of isolation, now seemed like it might be the key to their salvation. If he could just find a way to bridge the gap between human and Betazoid consciousness, to truly understand and communicate their shared predicament. With new hope, Randy activated his magnetic boots and prepared to step into the void of space. Time was running out, and the fate of the SS Andromeda and its crew hung in the balance. But as he took that first step, Randy realized that this crisis might be more than just a fight for survival. It could be the crucible that forged a new understanding between humans and Betazoids, if he could only find a way to bring them all together. Together. His mind reeled with the enormity of the task ahead, but he knew there was no time to hesitate. As Randy stepped into the void, the cold vacuum of space enveloped him. His magnetic boots kept him anchored to the hull, but the sensation of weightlessness was disorienting. He scanned the debris field, searching for any sign of Lyra. "Lyra!" he called over the comm system, knowing it was futile. If she had been pulled into space, she wouldn't be able to respond. A flash of movement caught his eye. About 20 meters away, a figure in a Betazoid uniform was clinging to a piece of twisted metal. Randy's heart leapt as he recognized Lyra's dark hair billowing around her helmet. He carefully made his way towards her, using his suit's maneuvering thrusters to navigate the field of debris. As he reached her, he saw that her eyes were wide with fear, but she was alive. "I've got you," Randy said, grasping her arm. "Let's get back inside." They made their way back to the breach, sealing it with an emergency force field. As soon as they were inside, Randy helped Lyra remove her helmet. "Captain," she gasped, "we need to—" An explosion rocked the ship, cutting her off. Alarms blared even louder than before. Warning, life support systems critically damaged. Estimated time to failure, 47 minutes, the ship's computer announced. Randy's mind raced. They needed to act fast. "Come on," he said to Lyra. "We need to get to the bridge and assess the situation." As they raced through the corridors, Randy noticed crew members in various states of distress. Some were frantically trying to repair systems, while others seemed lost in a haze of pheromone-induced confusion. They reached the bridge to find Zoran, the security chief, struggling to maintain order. "Captain," Zoran called out, "we've got multiple breaches, failing life support, and half the crew is—" He trailed off, gesturing to a group of Betazoids who were more interested in each other than the ship's dire situation. "And there's more," Zoran continued. "We've cornered the saboteur in the cargo bay. It's Vex, sir, the junior engineer." Randy's eyes widened. "Vex? Are you sure?" Zoran nodded grimly. "We caught him trying to access a sealed container. We think it might be related to our current situation." Randy turned to Lyra. "Can you work on restoring life support?" She nodded, already moving towards the engineering station. "Zoran, you're with me," Randy ordered. "We're going to the cargo bay." As they made their way through the ship, Randy could feel the rising tension. The unbonded crew members were becoming increasingly agitated, their eyes wild with a mix of fear and uncontrolled desire. They reached the cargo bay to find two security officers restraining Vex. The junior engineer was struggling, his face contorted with rage and frustration. "Why, Vex?" Randy demanded. "Why sabotage your own ship?" Vex spat on the ground. "My ship? I'm no Betazoid, and I'm certainly not one of you humans. I'm Zorgon, you fools." Randy's mind reeled. The Zorgons, a secretive alien race known for their shape-shifting abilities and their long-standing rivalry with both humans and Betazoids. "We knew this mission was too important to ignore," Vex continued, his voice filled with venom. "A human Betazoid alliance? We couldn't allow it. This ship was meant to be your coffin, and the spark that would ignite war between your species. Randy's gaze fell on the sealed container Vex had been trying to access. "What's in there?" he asked, though he feared he already knew the answer. Vex's face twisted into a cruel smile. "A gift for your Betazoid friends. A pheromone compound strong enough to drive them into a mating frenzy, so powerful it would tear this ship apart. And with a human captain at the helm, the political fallout would have been delicious." Randy's mind raced. The pheromone compound. It was dangerous, yes, but it might also be the key to their salvation. If he could use it in a controlled manner, it might accelerate the bonding process with the remaining crew members. "Zoran, secure Vex in the brig," Randy ordered. "Then meet me on the bridge. We're going to try something risky." As Zoran led the prisoner away, Randy carefully retrieved the sealed container. His heart pounded as he made his way back to the bridge. The fate of his crew, his ship, and possibly the future of human-Betazoid relations now rested in his hands. He found Lyra at the engineering station, her fingers flying over the controls. "Life support is stable for now," she reported, "but we're not out of danger yet." Randy nodded, holding up the container. "I think I have a solution, but it's not without risk." He quickly explained his plan to use a controlled dose of the pheromone to accelerate the bonding process. Lyra's eyes widened. "Captain, that's incredibly dangerous. The effects on your human physiology could be severe." "We don't have a choice," Randy said grimly. "It's this or we all die here. Are you with me?" Lyra hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Always, Captain." As they prepared to implement their desperate plan, the ship's comm system crackled to life. "SS Andromeda, this is Captain Thal of the Betazoid Defense Force vessel Enlightenment. You have ignored our previous warnings. We are now in weapons range and prepared to disable your vessel. This is your final chance to power down and prepare for boarding." Randy looked at Lyra, perseverance in his eyes. "Let's do this. It's now or never." With trembling hands, he opened the container and released a small, measured dose of the pheromone into the ship's air circulation system. Almost immediately, he felt a change in the atmosphere. The air seemed to thicken, and his skin tingled with an electric charge. "Initiating ship-wide telepathic link," Lyra announced, her voice strained with concentration. Randy closed his eyes, opening his mind to the crew. The rush of thoughts and emotions was overwhelming. He could feel the fear, the confusion, the primal urges of the Betazoids all crashing over him like a tidal wave. Through the chaos, he began to sense something else, a pattern, a rhythm to the Betazoid consciousness. As he focused on it, new knowledge began to unfold in his mind. Ancient Betazoid rituals, secret biological processes, cultural taboos, information that had been hidden from humans for centuries. "Lyra," he gasped, his voice barely above a whisper. "I think I know how we can save ourselves and convince the Betazoid vessel. But I need your help. We need to channel this energy, all of it, into a telepathic broadcast." Lyra's eyes widened in recognition. "The right of Kashara," she breathed. "But Captain, for a human to attempt such a thing, it could kill you." Randy managed a weak smile. "It's our only chance. Guide me through it." As Lyra began to explain the intricate details of the ancient Betazoid ritual, Randy could feel the combined mental energy of the crew building to a crescendo. The ship's systems, previously erratic, began to stabilize as the bonded crew worked in perfect unison to enact repairs. Randy stood at the center of the bridge, his body trembling with the effort of containing the immense psychic energy coursing through him. Lyra stood beside him, her hand on his shoulder, anchoring him to reality as they prepared to unleash a telepathic tsunami that would either save them all or consign them to oblivion. The Betazoid defense vessel loomed large in the view screen, weapons charged and ready to fire. As Randy raised his hands to begin the ritual, he knew that the next few moments would determine not just their fate, but the future of human-Betazoid relations for generations to come. With a deep breath, he began to focus the crew's combined mental energy, channeling it through his human mind in a way never before attempted. The bridge filled with an otherworldly light as the telepathic broadcast began, reaching out across the void of space towards the approaching Betazoid vessel. The telepathic broadcast surged through space, a tidal wave of raw mental energy that washed over the Betazoid defense vessel. On the bridge of the SS Andromeda, Randy's body convulsed as he channeled the combined psychic force of the entire crew. Lyra gripped his shoulder tightly, her face contorted with concern and concentration. Suddenly, Randy's eyes rolled back in his head and he collapsed to the floor. The otherworldly light that had filled the bridge winked out, plunging the room into relative darkness. "Captain!" Lyra cried, dropping to her knees beside him. She pressed her fingers to his neck, searching for a pulse. It was there, but weak and erratic. The view screen flickered to life, revealing the stern face of a Betazoid male. "This is Commander Thorin of the Betazoid Defense Force vessel Enlightenment. We received your unusual transmission. Explain yourselves immediately." Lyra stood, her mind racing. As the highest-ranking conscious officer, command now fell to her. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for the challenge ahead. "Commander Thoran, I am First Officer Lyra of the SS Andromeda. We've experienced a critical situation involving sabotage by a Zorgan agent. Our captain is currently incapacitated after attempting an emergency telepathic communication. Request permission to explain in detail and assistance for our injured." Thorin's eyes narrowed, but he nodded curtly. "Granted. Prepare for boarding. We will conduct a thorough investigation." As the communication ended, Lyra turned to Zoran. "Get the captain to medical bay immediately. I'll meet the boarding party in the docking bay." Zoran nodded, carefully lifting Randy's limp form. As they left the bridge, Lyra could see the strain on the faces of the remaining crew. The lingering effects of the pheromones were evident in their flushed skin and dilated pupils. In the docking bay, Lyra stood tall as the airlock cycled open. Commander Thorin strode in, flanked by several armed officers and a woman in a medical uniform. "Commander," Lyra said, inclining her head respectfully, "thank you for your assistance. If you'll follow me, I can explain the situation in detail." As they walked through the corridors, Lyra recounted the events of the past hours, the sabotage, the pheromone release, and Captain Miller's high-stakes endeavor to save the ship and crew. Thorin's face remained impassive, but the medical officer, who introduced herself as Dr. Alara, looked increasingly concerned. "Take me to your captain," Dr. Alara insisted as they neared the medical bay. Inside, Randy lay on a biobed, his vital signs flickering weakly on the monitor above. Dr. Alara immediately began scanning him with her medical tricorder, her brow furrowed in concentration. "His neural patterns are highly unstable," she announced after a moment. "The multiple bonding processes and the intense telepathic surge have caused significant changes in his brain chemistry. Without intervention, he may suffer permanent damage or death." Lyra felt her heart clench. "What can we do?" Dr. Alara hesitated, glancing at Commander Thoran before continuing. "There is a procedure. It's risky, but it may be his only chance. We could create a temporary neural link between the captain and a Betazoid to help stabilize his brain patterns." "I'll do it," Lyra said without hesitation. Thorin stepped forward, his face stern. "Out of the question. The potential diplomatic consequences if something were to go wrong with the human captain—" "With all due respect, Commander," Lyra interrupted, her voice sharp, "we don't have time for diplomatic concerns. Captain Miller risked everything to save this ship and prevent a potential war between our peoples. We owe him this chance." As they argued, the monitor above Randy's bed began to wail. His neural activity was spiking dangerously. Without another word, Lyra pushed past Thoran and placed her hands on either side of Randy's face. She closed her eyes, reaching out with her mind to form the deepest telepathic connection she had ever attempted. The world fell away as Lyra plunged into the chaotic maelstrom of Randy's consciousness. Fragments of memory and emotion swirled around her. His childhood on Earth, his first days at the Academy, the pride and fear he felt upon taking command of the Andromeda. Lyra pushed deeper, past the surface thoughts and into the very architecture of Randy's mind. She could feel the instability, the neural pathways fraying and misfiring. With gentle mental touches, she began to soothe and redirect, using her own stable Betazoid patterns as a template. As she worked, Lyra became aware of something extraordinary. Randy's mind was changing, adapting. Where a normal human mind would have shattered under the strain, his was reshaping itself, forming new connections and pathways. Dimly, Lyra became aware of alarms blaring in the physical world. The ship was groaning around them, systems failing under the accumulated strain of recent events. She could hear Thoran barking orders, calling for his crew to assist with repairs. But Lyra remained focused on Randy. She could feel him stirring, his consciousness rising to meet hers. And as it did, she felt a surge of something, a power she had never experienced before. Randy's eyes snapped open, glowing with an inner light. His mind reached out, not just to Lyra, but to everyone on the ship. Human and Betazoid alike gasped as they felt the touch of his thoughts. Lyra, Randy's voice was hoarse, but his mental voice rang out clear and strong. What's happening to me? Lyra helped him sit up, her mind still linked with his. Your brain has changed, Captain. You've developed some form of telepathic ability. Randy's eyes widened as he processed this information. He could feel the minds of the crew, their confusion, fear, and lingering arousal from the pheromones all washing over him. This is unprecedented, Dr. Alara breathed, staring at her readings in disbelief. A human manifesting Betazoid abilities to this degree? It shouldn't be possible. Thorin stepped forward, his face a mask of concern. This development could have serious implications for... He was cut off as the ship lurched violently. The lights flickered and dimmed as another system failure cascaded through the Andromeda. Randy stood swaying slightly but growing steadier by the moment. We need to focus on saving the ship. Everything else can wait. He closed his eyes, reaching out with his newfound abilities. Through the chaotic swirl of thoughts and emotions, he began to form connections, linking the minds of the human and Betazoid crew members. Captain, Lyra said softly, feeling the power building through their link. I think I know what we need to do. If we can harness this new ability of yours, we might be able to create a new form of communication between humans and Betazoids. It could change everything. Randy nodded, his face set with commitment. As the ship shuddered around them and the combined crews raced to enact repairs, he prepared to push his new abilities to their limit. The next few hours would determine not just their fate, but potentially the future of human-Betazoid relations. With Lyra by his side, Randy took a deep breath and opened his mind fully to the crew. The real work was just beginning. The ship rocked violently, throwing Randy off balance. He stumbled, his palms sweating as a tidal wave of thoughts and emotions crashed over him. Captain! Lyra's voice cut through the cacophony in his head. She steadied him, her hands on his shoulders. Focus on my voice. You need to filter out the noise. Randy squeezed his eyes shut, his face contorted with effort. The minds of every crew member aboard both ships poured into his consciousness. Fear, confusion, dedication, all swirling together in a dizzying maelstrom. I can't. There's too much, he gasped, his knees buckling. Lyra's grip tightened. You can. Picture a wall in your mind, solid, impenetrable. Now imagine a small window in that wall. That's all you need to let through. Slowly, painfully, Randy constructed the mental barrier, the flood of thoughts reduced to a manageable stream. He opened his eyes, meeting Lyra's concerned gaze. Better, he breathed, but how? Your mind has changed, Captain, Dr. Alara interrupted, her medical tricorder whirring. It seems the combination of the pheromones and the telepathic surge has awakened latent abilities in your brain. Commander Thorin stepped forward, his face a mask of concern. This is unprecedented, a human with full Betazoid telepathic abilities. The security implications alone. He was cut off as the ship lurched again. Sparks flew from a nearby console. Randy straightened, his mind racing. With his newfound abilities, he could sense the ship's systems in a way he never had before. The power grid is destabilizing. We need to reroute emergency power to the structural integrity field. He moved to a terminal, his fingers flying over the controls with uncanny speed and precision. As he worked, flashes of information, schematics, protocols, alien technologies, flitted through his mind. Lyra gasped, Captain, you're broadcasting. We can all see. Randy realized with a start that his thoughts were leaking out, visible to everyone around him. He saw classified Earth defense systems, trade agreements, top-secret research projects, all laid bare to the Betazoid crew. Commander Thorne's eyes widened. This changes everything. Captain Miller, I'm afraid I must insist you come with us, for your own safety and for the security of both our peoples. No, Lyra stepped between them. Separating him from me now could cause irreparable damage to his mind. He needs stability, not isolation. The tension in the room ratcheted up as Thorne's security team moved forward. Randy's human crew members tensed, ready to defend their captain. Suddenly, the artificial gravity failed. Everyone began to float, grasping desperately for handholds. The navigation system, Zoran shouted from a nearby console. We're veering off course, heading straight for an asteroid field. Randy's mind raced, trying to process the flood of information while maintaining control. He could feel the ship's systems responding to his subconscious fears, malfunctioning in increasingly dangerous ways. Everyone, calm down, he commanded, his voice strained. Your emotions are affecting me, and I'm affecting the ship. We need to... He was interrupted by a piercing alarm. Dr. Alara, clinging to a medical station, gasped as she read the results of a new scan. The pheromones, she said, her voice filled with dread. They've mutated. They're affecting everyone now, human and Betazoid alike. If we don't find a solution soon, we'll all lose control. Randy could feel it, a rising tide of unchecked emotion sweeping through both ships. Crew members began to argue, their voices rising. Others drew closer together, inhibitions lowering dangerously. In that moment of crisis, a flash of insight cut through the chaos in Randy's mind. I can see it, he said, his eyes unfocused. The compound. I can see its structure from both perspectives, human and Betazoid. If I can just... He trailed off, his consciousness expanding, reaching for the collective knowledge of the Betazoid mind. Lyra grabbed his hand, her eyes wide with fear. Randy, no! If you go too deep, you might lose yourself entirely. He turned to her, his gaze intense. It's the only way. I need you with me, Lyra. Be my anchor. She hesitated for a split second, then nodded. Always. As they joined minds, diving deep into the vast ocean of Betazoid consciousness, the situation around them continued to deteriorate. The asteroid field loomed ever closer on the consoles. Crew members struggled against the growing effects of the mutated pheromones, their movements erratic in the zero-gravity environment. Commander Thorin, his own composure slipping, made a decision. All hands, focus on keeping these ships intact. We'll deal with the security situation later. As his crew scrambled to assist, Randy and Lyra stood perfectly still, their eyes closed, hands clasped. To the outside observer, they appeared serene. But within their joined minds, a furious race against time was unfolding. Randy's consciousness expanded, touching the minds of every Betazoid aboard both ships. Ancient knowledge flooded his awareness, centuries of scientific discovery, philosophical insights, and deeply held secrets. Lyra's presence was a lifeline, keeping him tethered to his human identity as he swam through the vast sea of alien thoughts. Together, they sifted through the collective knowledge, searching for the key to synthesizing an antidote. As the minutes ticked by, Randy delved deeper, pushing the boundaries of his new abilities. He could feel his human perspective shifting, melding with the Betazoid collective in ways he had never imagined possible. Lyra's mental voice called out to him, tinged with worry. Randy, don't go too far. Remember who you are. But the siren call of infinite knowledge was strong. As Randy teetered on the edge of losing himself completely, the solution suddenly crystallized in his mind. His eyes snapped open, glowing with an otherworldly light. I know how to fix this, he announced, his voice resonating with newfound power. But we'll need to work fast. As the asteroid field drew ever closer and the crews of both ships fought against their own rising emotions, Randy began to outline his plan. The fate of everyone aboard hung in the balance, dependent on this unprecedented melding of human ingenuity and Betazoid wisdom. The next few minutes would determine not just their survival, but the future of human Betazoid relations. And for Randy, the question remained, After touching the depths of an alien consciousness, would he ever be the same again? As Randy teetered on the edge of losing himself to the vast Betazoid consciousness, a glimmer of ancient knowledge sparked within the collective. His eyes snapped open, glowing with an otherworldly light. "I know how to fix this," he announced, his voice resonating with newfound power. "But we'll need to work fast." Lyra steadied him as he swayed, still disoriented from the mental journey. "What did you find, Randy?" "The harmony confluence," he replied, his words carrying the weight of centuries. "An ancient Betazoid ritual that can neutralize the pheromones, but it requires a perfect balance of human and Betazoid mental energies." Commander Thorin's eyes widened. "The harmony confluence? That's nothing more than a myth, a bedtime story for Betazoid children." "It's real," Randy insisted, his gaze sweeping the room. "And I'm the only one who can lead it. My hybrid mental state, it's the key." As Randy spoke, the ship lurched violently. Zoran's voice cut through the chaos. "Captain, we've entered the asteroid field. Navigation systems are failing." Thorin barked orders into his communicator. "All hands, initiate emergency protocols. Deploy tractor beam to stabilize the Andromeda's trajectory." The Betazoid military vessel hummed to life, its powerful tractor beam reaching out to cradle the struggling Andromeda. The two ships moved in tandem, weaving through the deadly obstacle course of space debris. Meanwhile, the effects of the mutated pheromones intensified. Crew members began to exhibit extreme emotional responses. In the corner, two engineers grappled with each other, their faces contorted with rage. Nearby, a group of scientists huddled together, hands roaming inappropriately as they succumbed to uncontrollable lust. Dr. Alara worked frantically at her station, her hands shaking as she attempted to synthesize a chemical suppressant. "I need more time," she muttered, wiping sweat from her brow. "Just a few more minutes." Randy turned to Lyra, his expression grave. "We don't have a few more minutes. We need to start the ritual now." Lyra nodded, taking his hands in hers. "Guide me through it. I'll be your anchor." Randy closed his eyes, reaching out with his mind to touch every Betazoid present. Their consciousnesses flickered like candles in the wind, buffeted by the chaotic emotions swirling around them. "Focus on my voice," Randy projected, his mental tone steady and calm. "Picture a still pond at dawn. The surface is like glass, unbroken and serene." As the Betazoids began to calm, Randy felt the human minds around him. Sharp, distinct, grounded in physical reality. He became the bridge between two worlds, channeling the ethereal energy of Betazoid thought through the solid framework of human cognition. The air in the room began to shimmer, charged with psychic energy. Randy's body tensed, blood trickling from his nose as the strain of the ritual took its toll. Lyra gasped, feeling the backlash through their connection. Without hesitation, she opened her mind fully, absorbing some of the psychic overflow. Pain lanced through her head, but she held firm. As the harmony confluence reached its peak, Randy's eyes flew open. A visible wave of energy burst from him, washing over both ships. In its wake, clarity returned. The fog of uncontrolled emotion lifted, leaving crew members blinking in confusion. But the massive release of energy had consequences. Consoles sparked and sputtered, and the lights flickered ominously. "Life support systems failing," the computer announced dispassionately. "Structural integrity field at 23% and falling." Randy, his mind clear for the first time in hours, made a split-second decision. He reached out once more, but this time to every mind on both ships, human and Betazoid alike. "Listen to me," his mental voice rang out. "We can save ourselves, but only if we work together. I'm going to link our minds. Don't fight it." In an instant, a network of thought sprang into existence. Human ingenuity melded with Betazoid intuition. Engineers from both species worked in perfect synchronicity, their hands guided by shared knowledge and purpose. Thorin watched in awe as his crew moved with unprecedented efficiency. "Incredible," he murmured. As critical systems came back online and the ships maneuvered clear of the asteroid field, Randy's strength finally gave out. He collapsed to the floor, Lyra barely managing to catch him. "Randy!" she cried, cradling his head. His skin was pale, his breathing shallow. Dr. Alara rushed over, medical tricorder whirring. His brain activity is off the charts. It's like his mind is reconfiguring itself. Thorin stepped forward, his face etched with concern. "There's a facility," he said, his voice low. "A secret Betazoid medical center on a nearby moon. They specialize in unique telepathic conditions." Lyra looked up, hope warring with suspicion in her eyes. "Why would you offer this?" "Because what I've witnessed here today changes everything," Thorin replied. "The potential for human Betazoid cooperation, it's beyond anything I ever imagined." As both ships changed course for the secret facility, Lyra held Randy's hand tightly. She could still feel him, a faint presence at the edge of her consciousness. But he was changing, becoming something new, a true bridge between their peoples. The next few hours would determine not just Randy's fate, but the future of interstellar relations. As the secret Betazoid moon loomed large in the view screen, Lyra steeled herself for the challenges ahead. Whatever happened, she knew that nothing would ever be the same again. As the secret Betazoid moon loomed large in the view screen, Lyra tightened her grip on Randy's hand. His skin felt clammy, his breathing shallow and irregular. The mental link between them flickered like a dying flame, Randy's consciousness slipping further away with each passing moment. "We're beginning our descent," Commander Thorin announced, his voice tight with tension. "The medical team is standing by." The two ships, the SS Andromeda and the Betazoid military vessel, moved in perfect synchronization as they entered the moon's atmosphere. Through the viewports, Lyra caught glimpses of a landscape unlike anything she'd ever seen. Crystalline structures that seemed to pulse with an inner light, nestled among rolling hills of iridescent vegetation. As they touched down on a landing pad adjacent to a sprawling complex, Randy's body suddenly went rigid. His eyes flew open, glowing with an unnatural light as his back arched off the medical gurney. "He's going into neural shock," Dr. Alara shouted, her fingers flying over her medical tricorder. "We need to get him to the treatment chamber now." The moment the airlock cycled open, a team of Betazoid doctors in shimmering robes rushed aboard. Without a word, they took control of Randy's gurney, their movements fluid and coordinated as if choreographed. Lyra ran alongside them as they raced through winding corridors of the facility. The walls seemed to hum with energy, and she felt a tingling sensation at the base of her skull, the collective mental presence of hundreds of powerful telepaths. They burst into a vast circular chamber, dominated by a massive crystalline structure. It pulsed with bioluminescent energy, casting ever-shifting patterns of light and shadow across the room. At its center was a reclined platform, clearly designed to cradle a patient. As the doctors moved to transfer Randy to the platform, Lyra stepped forward. "I'm not leaving him," she said, her voice leaving no room for argument. "Our mental link is the only thing keeping him tethered to his human side." The lead Betazoid doctor, a tall woman with striking silver eyes, studied Lyra for a moment before nodding. "Very well. There's an auxiliary connection point. It's never been used with a non-Betazoid before, but given the circumstances—" "I don't care about the risks," Lyra interrupted. "Just do it." As Randy was connected to the main apparatus, Lyra took her place on a smaller platform nearby. Cool metal electrodes were pressed against her temples, and she felt a sudden rush of vertigo as her mind was pulled into the machine's telepathic field. For a moment, there was nothing but darkness and the sensation of falling. Then, with a burst of kaleidoscopic color, Lyra found herself in a swirling mindscape. Fragments of memories, both hers and Randy's, floated past like leaves caught in a whirlwind. She could sense Randy's presence, but it was fractured, scattered across this mental realm. Concentrating, Lyra reached out with her thoughts. "Randy, I'm here. Follow my voice." A tendril of consciousness brushed against her mind, familiar yet changed. Randy's mental voice, when it came, was faint and confused. "Lyra, I can't remember who I am. There's so much, too much." Lyra pushed forward through the chaotic dreamscape, using their shared memories as anchors. She relived their first meeting aboard the Andromeda, felt again the spark of connection that had grown between them. "Remember, Randy, remember who you are. where you come from. As she moved deeper into the merged consciousness, Lyra encountered swirling vortexes of Betazoid knowledge and ability. They tugged at Randy's mind, threatening to subsume his human identity entirely. She could feel his struggle, the war between human individuality and the collective Betazoid mindset. "Fight it, Randy," Lyra urged, her own mind straining with the effort of maintaining their connection. "You don't have to choose. You can be both. Find the balance." In the physical world, hours passed. The combined crews of the Andromeda and the Betazoid vessel worked tirelessly on repairs, their newfound understanding bridging gaps in technology and methodology. Dr. Ilara, her eyes ringed with exhaustion, pored over data with the facility's researchers, piecing together a treatment for the mutated pheromones. Inside the mindscape, Lyra and Randy continued their journey. They faced manifestations of Randy's fears and doubts, battled against the overwhelming tide of Betazoid consciousness. Slowly, painfully, they began to weave together the disparate threads of Randy's psyche. Lyra shared her own memories and emotions freely, offering them as a foundation for Randy's human side. In return, she felt the touch of his new Betazoid abilities, a vast, awe-inspiring potential that took her breath away. As their minds intertwined more deeply than ever before, Lyra realized that she too was changing. The experience was reshaping her understanding of herself, of Randy, of the very nature of consciousness itself. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Lyra sensed a shift. The chaos of the mindscape began to settle, swirling elements coalescing into a new, unified whole. Randy's presence grew stronger, more defined. "Lyra," his mental voice called out, clearer now. "I can see it all, both sides, human and Betazoid. It's incredible." Before she could respond, Lyra felt a gentle but insistent tugging. The mindscape began to fade around her as she was drawn back to physical reality. She opened her eyes to find herself still on the auxiliary platform of the treatment chamber. Her body ached, muscles stiff from lying motionless for how long? "Welcome back," the silver-eyed Betazoid doctor said softly. "You've been under for nearly a week." Lyra's gaze immediately went to the central platform where Randy lay. His eyes were still closed, but his breathing was deep and regular. The frantic energy that had surrounded him earlier was gone, replaced by an aura of calm. "Did it work?" Lyra asked, her voice hoarse from disuse. "Is he—" As if in answer, Randy's eyes slowly opened. He blinked once, twice, then turned his head to meet Lyra's anxious gaze. A smile spread across his face. The same warm, familiar smile she'd fallen in love with, but now underlaid with something new, something profound. "Hello, Lyra," Randy said, his voice strong and clear. "I think we have a lot to talk about."
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.